The millionaire's autistic daughter screamed in the restaurant until a waitress did the unthinkable. On a late autumn night in New York City, while Times Square's lights flickered endlessly inside one of Manhattan's most elegant restaurants, a man faced the greatest struggle of his life. Michael Carter, 42 years old, was a celebrated tech entrepreneur, the visionary who had built a global software empire. He was known as a strategic mind, a brilliant leader, and one of the youngest billionaires in America. Yet all the success, wealth, and power in the world could not prepare him for the hardest battle of all, being the father of a very special little girl. Beside him that night sat Emily, his 8-year-old daughter, a beautiful child with bright blue eyes that sparkled like the summer sky. Emily was not like other children. She carried a remarkable mind, capable of speaking endlessly about the stars, the galaxies, and the infinite world of numbers. But Emily also lived with a reality that set her apart, a world filled with sounds and changes her sensitive mind could not endure. Emily was autistic. When Michael stepped into the restaurant that night, he had prepared everything: a private table, staff carefully instructed, a perfect dinner designed to keep Emily calm while impressing potential investors. He believed he had covered every detail, but deep down, Michael always knew that with Emily, the smallest disruption could shatter even the most careful plan. That evening, Michael carried into the restaurant not only the hope of a successful meeting with potential investors, but also a fragile wish that Emily might sit through the meal, enjoy her food, and avoid being overwhelmed by the world around her. Emily had always been a mystery to Michael. She could recite the names of hundreds of stars, solve math problems well beyond her grade level, yet she could not endure sudden noises or any disruption to her daily routine. A spoon set in the wrong place, a light bulb shining too brightly, or an unfamiliar voice could send her world spiraling out of control. When Emily was 4, her mother walked away. She could not bear the pressure of raising a child who was different. From that day on, Michael became everything: father, mother, protector. He tried his best, hiring top specialists, exploring the latest therapies. But no matter how many techniques he learned, when Emily's meltdown struck, he always felt powerless. That night in the restaurant, Michael sat beside Emily, soothing her with stories about the universe, her greatest passion. At first, everything seemed steady. The investors smiled, the meal flowed smoothly. For a brief moment, Michael dared to believe that perhaps this time his plan would work. Then a sharp crash tore through the air. A waiter had accidentally dropped a tray of crystal glasses. The shattering sound struck Emily's mind like lightning. In an instant, her face changed. Emily began trembling, clutching her ears tightly, her body rocking violently. Small whimpers escalated into piercing screams that echoed across the elegant dining room. Every gaze turned toward them. Michael bent down quickly, wrapping his arms around his daughter, whispering the comforting words he had practiced for years. But this time, nothing worked. Emily was trapped in a storm of sensations, screaming, pounding her hands on the table, tears streaming down her cheeks, as if trying to escape a pain she could not explain. The restaurant froze. Guests whispered, a few shook their heads in irritation. The staff stood helpless, unsure how to act. The investors struggled to keep polite expressions, but their discomfort was plain in their eyes. Michael felt heat rising to his face. Not because of Emily, he had never been ashamed of her, but because of the ignorance surrounding them. He was a man who controlled everything: million-dollar deals, intricate business strategies. Yet in the face of his daughter's suffering, he was utterly powerless. At that moment, Michael knew he could not go on. He considered scooping Emily into his arms and leaving, abandoning the stairs and the dinner entirely. But just as he prepared to rise, a small figure began walking calmly toward their table. It was a young waitress, her brown hair tied neatly at the back, her eyes shining with a calmness Michael had never seen in anyone during moments like this. Her name was Sarah Thompson. At 25, she might have seemed like just another waitress in an upscale restaurant. But behind the uniform, she was a senior psychology student at New York University, specializing in children with special needs. By day, she studied relentlessly. By night, she worked shifts to support herself. From the moment Michael and Emily had walked into the restaurant, Sarah had noticed them. The careful way the father guided his daughter, the way he controlled every small detail of their surroundings. It told her this was not an ordinary evening. And when the sound of shattering glass echoed, she did not see a spoiled child disturbing the guests. She saw a little girl overwhelmed by sounds too intense for her mind to handle. Without asking permission, Sarah quietly walked toward Michael's table. Ignoring the glances of her coworkers and the murmurs of irritated customers, she slowly knelt down to meet Emily at eye level. She didn't touch the girl, didn't rush to speak. Instead, Sarah began to breathe, deep, visible, rhythmic breaths for Emily to see. That simple act seemed to carve out a pause in the storm. Emily hesitated, her tearful eyes shifting toward Sarah. Seizing the fragile moment, Sarah gently pulled from the pocket of her apron a small piece of multicolored fabric. Its surfaces varied, smooth, rough, soft. It was a sensory tool she always carried, part of her studies and practice. She placed it on the table, not forcing Emily to take it. She simply remained there, breathing steadily, offering herself as an anchor of peace. The restaurant fell into silence as everyone watched. Michael stood frozen, hardly believing his eyes. In all these years, no one had ever approached Emily during a meltdown with such naturalness, such instinctive understanding. Gradually, Emily's screams softened. She was still trembling, but her eyes, curious and hesitant, locked onto the little square of fabric on the table. After a long pause, she stretched out a trembling hand, brushing it lightly. The predictable, controlled texture gave her a sense of relief. The murmurs in the restaurant faded. Around their table, the world seemed to shrink, leaving only a bubble of calm where three lives quietly connected. As the room slowly regained its rhythm, Sarah stood up, gently reassuring Michael that Emily would be fine. Her words did not sound like those of a waitress, but rather like someone who deeply understood the world Michael had been struggling with for years. Michael was speechless. His eyes overflowed with amazement and gratitude, mixed with disbelief that a young stranger could do what so many experts had failed to achieve. He longed to ask her countless questions, but Sarah simply smiled softly and returned to her duties, leaving father and daughter in a rare circle of peace. That night, back in his quiet Upper East Side apartment, Michael could not stop thinking about Sarah. The image of her kneeling down, patiently breathing with Emily, and the way his daughter gradually calmed as if by magic. It all clung to his mind. Over the years, he had met doctors with prestigious degrees, specialists renowned nationwide. Yet none had approached Emily with such sincerity and simplicity. A week later, Michael returned to the restaurant. This time, there was no business dinner, no pressure from judging eyes, just a quiet meal between father and daughter. Deep down, he only wanted to know, was that night a fortunate accident, or did Sarah truly have a rare gift? The moment they walked in, Sarah recognized them immediately. Her face lit up with a genuine smile, effortless and warm. She approached their table as though greeting old friends. What astonished Michael most was Emily. A child who usually avoided strangers now looked directly at Sarah, her eyes reflecting recognition. Then, in a rare whisper, Emily said, "Hi." Just 2 short letters, but for Michael it resounded like music. He could hardly believe his daughter had initiated words with another person. Sarah knelt down, smiling at Emily. "I'm so glad to see you again." Emily gave a small nod, then pulled from her pocket the little fabric square Sarah had given her that night. She held it like a treasure, pressed it to her cheek, and whispered, "I like this." Michael froze. For years, Emily had rarely expressed her feelings outwardly. Yet here, with Sarah, she not only spoke, but shared a glimpse of her inner world. Throughout the meal, Sarah passed by their table several times, not only to serve, but to engage with Emily. She showed her how to fold napkins into birds, explained why the restaurant lights glowed in warm yellow instead of harsh white. Emily listened intently, occasionally even smiling, a rare gift from a child so often withdrawn. Michael sat in silence, watching, his heart filling with something he thought he had lost: hope. Perhaps, he thought, Emily was not a door locked away from the world. Perhaps she only needed someone who knew how to knock with the right rhythm. And Sarah, with her natural grace and warm heart, had done just that. After that evening, Michael knew he could not let the opportunity slip away. A week passed, then two, yet the image of Sarah and her calm, gentle presence lingered vividly in his mind. It wasn't only because she had helped Emily through a meltdown, but because she had done what no one else had. She had reached his daughter's heart. One afternoon, after taking Emily to Central Park, Michael returned to the restaurant, waiting until Sarah finished her shift. When she stepped out the door, he approached, his voice sincere. "Thank you for what you did for Emily. I've never seen her trust someone so quickly. I want to ask if you would consider helping us more." Sarah looked surprised, but her eyes softened. "I only did what I knew. I'm still learning. I'm not a professional yet." Michael shook his head. "You did what many professionals couldn't. I don't need a degree. I need your heart and your understanding." His request left Sarah speechless. For years, she had dreamed of becoming a therapist for children with special needs, but reality forced her to work nights, struggling to pay tuition. Michael's invitation was more than a job. It was a door opening toward the dream she had always carried. After a few days of reflection, Sarah agreed. They began with short sessions a few times a week. Sarah didn't come as a specialist, but as a companion. She taught Emily simple techniques: deep breathing, using color cards to express emotions, creating quiet corners where she could self-soothe. At first, Emily resisted. She was used to rejecting any attempt to reach her, but Sarah never pushed, never forced. She simply showed up, patient, gentle, respectful of Emily's unique rhythm. And slowly, piece by piece, the locked door began to crack open. Michael watched quietly, astonished to realize he too was changing. He was no longer just the father who feared every meltdown, but a man learning to see the world through Emily's eyes. Sarah was not only teaching Emily, she was teaching him that instead of shielding his daughter from the world, he had to prepare the world to embrace her. One evening, when Emily completed a small exercise Sarah had given, using a color card to say, "I'm sad," instead of screaming, Michael felt his throat tighten. To anyone else, it might have seemed insignificant, but to him, it was nothing short of a miracle. This new beginning was not only for Emily, it was for Michael as well. Deep inside, a fragile faith was awakening. For the first time in years, perhaps they were no longer alone in this journey. The following months unfolded with moments Michael once believed could only exist in dreams. Emily began to change, not because someone wanted her to be normal, but because for the first time, there was someone truly listening to her inner world. That someone was Sarah. At first, the progress was small and slow. Emily learned to use the color cards Sarah had made. Green meant calm, yellow meant worried, red meant angry. Instead of crying or screaming, she began to hold up a card, sometimes with trembling hands, but clear enough. For Michael, it was like a doorway opening. He could finally understand his daughter's emotions before they erupted into chaos. Sarah also taught Emily the star breathing technique, tracing an imaginary star in the air with her finger, each line paired with a deep breath in or out. Emily loved the game, and gradually she began to use it to calm herself whenever she felt overwhelmed. One day, when the classroom lights suddenly shifted and upset her, instead of screaming, Emily quietly stepped to the corner, raised the yellow card, and began her star breathing. Michael stood frozen, watching. He had never seen his daughter face discomfort with such composure. But the greatest change was not just in skills, it was in how Emily began to see herself. With Sarah, she was never treated as someone broken. She was seen as unique, with her own intelligence and sensitivities. Sarah often told her, "Your brain isn't broken, it just processes the world differently." One evening, after finishing a small exercise, Emily walked up to Sarah. She wrapped her arms tightly around her and whispered, "Thank you for showing me my brain isn't broken. It's just different." Sarah's throat tightened as tears filled her eyes. From a distance, Michael pressed a trembling hand against his chest, feeling his heart tighten with overwhelming emotion. That simple yet powerful sentence felt like the opening of a new chapter for all three of them. From then on, Emily began showing curiosity about the outside world. She shared with Sarah her favorite constellations, even teaching her how to recognize Sirius and Polaris. Sarah listened intently, sometimes pretending not to know, so Emily could explain further. The smile that lingered on Emily's face was the clearest proof of her progress. Michael noticed another change as well. Emily was beginning to trust adults. In the past, she had clung only to him, rejecting any outside contact. But with Sarah, she gradually opened her heart. That trust was not only invaluable for Emily, but also healing for Michael himself, the man who once believed no one in the world could truly understand his daughter. Day by day, small moments accumulated into something miraculous. Emily wasn't becoming a normal child by society's standards. She was becoming herself, stronger, more confident, and most importantly, aware that she was not alone. It wasn't only Emily who was changing. Michael, too, was beginning a profound transformation he had never anticipated. In the past, Michael believed his greatest responsibility was to shield Emily from the outside world, a world loud, harsh, and full of judgment. He made detailed plans, controlled every meal and every outing, always ready to scoop her up and leave at the slightest incident. He thought that was enough, that loving his daughter meant keeping her away from harm. But Sarah gently shifted his perspective. Through each session, Michael realized that love wasn't a cage of safety, but a bridge leading his daughter into real life. He learned to recognize the triggers that heightened Emily's anxiety, not to avoid them forever, but to help her face them in safe, manageable ways. He began noticing details he once overlooked: the roar of hand dryers in public restrooms, the glare of fluorescent lights, the overpowering smell of food. Together with Sarah, he found ways to turn those overwhelming moments into experiences Emily could endure, even adapt to. Strangely, as he focused on understanding Emily, Michael noticed he was changing too. He grew less impatient, less controlling, and more willing to listen, not only to his daughter, but to his own heart. Each evening, watching Emily study with Sarah, her eyes glowing with excitement, Michael felt something stir inside him. It wasn't just gratitude, it was respect, admiration for a young woman who had accomplished what he had once desperately sought. And from that respect, a quiet affection began to grow, even as Michael tried to bury it. He knew this was not the time to think of himself. Emily was still his only priority. Yet each time he saw Sarah kneel to listen with unconditional gentleness, or heard Emily's laughter ring out because of Sarah's playful clumsiness, Michael felt something within him begin to heal. Slowly, he no longer felt alone. Once, he had thought of himself and Emily as two against the world. Now, with Sarah, he felt he had a true ally, not a replacement, but a compliment, someone who entered Emily's world with respect and patience. One late night, after tucking Emily into bed, Michael sat in the dim living room. He thought of the path behind him, the desperate nights when no one understood Emily, and now the present, when his daughter smiled more, trusted more. And he realized that he too was relearning how to be a father, not merely to protect, but to prepare his daughter to step into the world on her own steady feet. In the months that followed, the relationship between Michael and Sarah gradually went beyond gratitude. They shared simple dinners, long conversations about Emily's future, and moments of silence filled with understanding. Emily also grew closer to Sarah. The girl laughed more, shared more, and sometimes even unconsciously held Sarah's hand while walking, as if she had found safety there. But then a figure from the past appeared, bringing storms Michael never expected. Then, without warning, a ghost from the past returned. Rebecca, Emily's biological mother, appeared after 4 years of silence. She claimed she had changed, that she wanted to start over, to reclaim the role of mother she had once abandoned. At first, Michael did not believe her, but Rebecca insisted on staying in the house, and for Emily's sake, he agreed. As soon as Rebecca returned, Sarah began to keep her distance. She refused invitations, using her studies as an excuse. Michael noticed, but did not stop her. He understood Sarah did not want to interfere while the biological family reunited. Yet it was precisely this absence that threw Emily into panic. The girl became irritable, struggled to sleep, and often withdrew into silence. The progress Sarah had helped build seemed to shatter. One evening, Emily screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I want Mommy Sarah. I don't want Mommy Rebecca." Rebecca froze, trying to step closer. "Emily, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong, but I'm still your mother. I've changed. Please give me a chance." Emily trembled, covering her ears, crying out. Michael quickly held his daughter and took her to bed. When Emily finally slept, he went downstairs to confront his ex-wife. "Do you know what you've done, Rebecca?" Michael's voice was taut like a string ready to snap. "You abandoned Emily when she was just 4. You ran after your lover, leaving me with a child who woke in terror every night. And now, when everything was finally stabilizing, you come back and destroy it all." Rebecca flushed but protested. "I'm her mother. I have the right—" "Right?" Michael cut her off, eyes blazing. "The right to be a mother doesn't come from blood. It comes from presence, from daily love. Emily has found that in Sarah, not you. You say you want to be her mother? You had your chance, and you threw it away." Rebecca's voice broke. "Michael, please give me a chance." Michael interrupted, eyes bloodshot. "There are no more chances. I will finalize the divorce. Tomorrow morning, leave this house. Emily doesn't need a mother in name only. She needs a real mother, and that is Sarah." The argument woke Emily. She rushed out, breath quick, hands trembling. At first, the familiar panic seized her. She covered her ears, screaming. Michael panicked and moved to hold her, but then something miraculous happened. Emily stopped herself, took a deep breath, and traced a star in the air, the technique Sarah had taught her. The room fell silent. Rebecca stared at her daughter, bewildered. Emily, eyes brimming with tears but shining with clarity, turned toward her biological mother. Her voice shook but was firm. "I don't need Mommy Rebecca. I need Mommy Sarah. She understands me. She's here when I'm scared. She didn't leave me." Her words cut through the air like a blade. Rebecca lowered her head, silent. Michael moved forward and hugged his daughter tightly, his heart aching yet proud. Emily, the girl who once could not express her feelings, had spoken her truth. Rebecca burst into tears, covered her face, and left into the night. That night, Michael made his decision. He carried Emily, packed their things, and drove through the brightly lit streets of New York. Emily stayed quiet, clutching the sensory cloth Sarah had once given her, eyes glowing in the dark. When the car stopped in front of Sarah's small apartment, Emily jumped out before Michael could open the door. She ran up, pounding urgently on the door. When Sarah opened, still startled, Emily threw herself into her arms, hugging tight, sobbing uncontrollably. "Miss Sarah." Sarah held her close, tears streaming down her face. Michael stood behind, silently watching the scene. In his heart, one truth became certain. Sarah had not only changed Emily, she had saved him as well. That night, after Emily had calmed down in Sarah's arms, Michael offered a small idea to ease his daughter's heart. "Do you want to get some ice cream?" he asked, brushing her hair gently. Her bright blue eyes lit up instantly. Emily nodded eagerly. Sarah smiled, and the three of them stepped out into the New York night, where the glow of a nearby convenience store cast a soft, welcoming light. They picked colorful cartons of ice cream. Emily clutched her beloved chocolate flavor, skipping along and quietly counting her steps on the sidewalk. Michael and Sarah walked behind her, the space between them feeling smaller than ever. When Emily sat at a small table outside the store, happily eating her ice cream, Michael and Sarah stood side by side, watching her in silence. The calm around them created a space for truths both had kept hidden too long. "Sarah," Michael began softly, "thank you, not just for helping Emily, but for saving me too. I never thought anyone could walk into our lives and understand her, accept her, the way you do." Sarah turned to him, her eyes glistening under the dim lights. "Michael, it's me who should thank you. You and Emily showed me that my dream has meaning. I've always believed every child deserves to be understood and loved. But meeting you both, it made me certain I'm on the right path." A tender silence stretched between them. Michael drew a deep breath, his voice husky as he continued. "I know this moment isn't perfect. I know you still have dreams to chase. But Sarah, I love you. I've loved you for a long time, and I want you to be more than Emily's guide. I want you to be part of our family." Sarah froze, tears spilling before she could stop them. She bit her lip, then smiled through the blur. "I love you too, Michael, but above all, I love Emily. And if she allows it, then I'd love to be your family." Just then, Emily looked up from her carton, her lips smudged with chocolate. She giggled, scooping up a big spoonful and holding it out. "Daddy, your turn, then Mommy Sarah." Both laughed, sitting down beside her. They took turns accepting spoonfuls from her small hand, as though sharing the simplest yet sweetest happiness together. Under the soft yellow lights of the convenience store, with the distant hum of city traffic, a new family was born. Not perfect, not traditional, but filled with love and hope. Time passed, and that simple evening with ice cream was only the beginning of a new journey. From the moment Michael and Sarah confessed their feelings, the three of them began writing a story that was no longer just their own, but one that gave hope to many others. With his vision as an entrepreneur, Michael poured his heart and resources into making Sarah's dream come true. Together they built The Bridge, a pioneering center in New York dedicated to autistic children and their families. It was not a sterile therapy clinic, but a second home where every child was seen with respect and love. Sarah became the director of programs, leading a passionate team. She designed personalized therapies, emphasizing that the goal was never to fix autistic children, but to teach the world how to understand and communicate with them. Michael stood beside her, not only as a benefactor, but as a partner, often attending family sessions to inspire other parents. And Emily, the little girl who once shrank from the world in fear, now became the symbol of the center. At 10 years old, she could stand before a group of parents and explain how she used color cards or star breathing to manage her emotions. Her voice, clear yet steady, often brought tears to their eyes because they realized their children's futures could be just as bright. Yet the greatest legacy wasn't the center. It was in their own home. It was the place where Emily learned that true love never abandons, never judges. The place where Sarah and Michael discovered that happiness doesn't come from perfection, but from embracing differences and turning them into strength. One spring evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Emily suddenly said, "I want to write a book for kids like me. I want to tell them our brains aren't broken, they're just more colorful." Michael and Sarah exchanged smiles. In that moment, they understood. The true legacy of love was not the center nor financial success. It was this little girl, once called different, now confident enough to stand tall, ready to share her voice with the world. 3 years had passed, but to Michael, it still felt like yesterday. He remembered vividly the night in that small apartment when Sarah opened the door and Emily leapt into her arms, sobbing. That was the moment of fate, when 3 hearts became one family. One autumn evening, Michael prepared for a new beginning. Under the soft golden light, he knelt before Sarah, his hands trembling as he held a simple ring that carried his entire world. His voice was husky as he said, "Sarah, you saved Emily. You saved me. I don't want you to be just my love. I want you to be my forever home. Will you marry me?" Sarah burst into tears, throwing her arms around him and nodding again and again. Emily, standing nearby, jumped up and cheered. "I finally have a real mom, Mommy Sarah." Their wedding was neither lavish nor loud, just a quiet celebration in a small garden. Emily was the honored witness, wearing a little white dress and carrying a bouquet of daisies. In her speech, her voice trembled, yet rang clear. Family isn't just where you're born. Family is where you are loved and never abandoned. And I found that with Daddy and Mommy Sarah. The crowd fell silent, then erupted into tears and applause. A year later, their home filled with the cries and laughter of a baby boy. Emily cradled him proudly, her eyes sparkling. "I have a baby brother. I'll be the best big sister in the world." Michael and Sarah gazed at their 2 children, hearts overflowing with gratitude. They knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but they no longer feared. Love had turned wounds into strength and differences into miracles. One weekend afternoon, they strolled through the city and paused in front of the little ice cream shop where it had all begun. The same old chairs, the same golden glow, but this time the air was alive with Emily's laughter, the baby's coos, and the sound of spoons clinking against bowls. A once fragile circle had become whole. Emily sat in the middle, spoon-feeding her baby brother with one hand and offering spoonfuls to her parents with the other. All 4 laughed together, as if the world around them had vanished, leaving only their small yet eternal circle. Michael held Sarah's hand and whispered, "I once thought love wasn't real, but you proved it can do more than change a life. It can build an entire world." Sarah smiled, resting her head on his shoulder.